And I would invite here with a keynote speech. There is also a certain tradition which we have changed over this year. Ivan Yakovlevich Kazachenko, our teacher, doctor of law, professor and student of Mitrofan Ivanovich Kovalov, and Danil Nazipovich Sergeyev, candidate of law, associate professor. Dear friends, dear colleagues, Margarita Mikhailovna, your kind words for me are the highest praise and honor. I'm very grateful that your heart radiates heat, your soul radiates common sense. Thank you for everything. You know, for the 17th time, we gathered in this blessed Ural space. And what they say about the geography of those present, I wanted to say that what force should attract people here to overcome organizational difficulties. Apparently some kind of force should be so powerful that it has no obstacles. And I think this force is on Ural. This is a memory of Mitrofan Ivanovich Kovalov. It's multifaceted. And here we are going for the 70th time. All topics are unique. No, I want to say that no one gets out. They are dictated by life. In every conference and in every topic, there is a certain phase of talent of Mitrofan Ivanovich. And whoever works with him can agree with me that all the creativity and talent of Mitrofan Ivanovich and this is a certain attitude to life. His talent is good-natured. His attitude is conciliatory in a good way. And therefore, this topic is raised every time. It's easily discussed, although complex issues are raised. It's important to say that humanity is developing according to a certain spiral model. It doesn't have smooth transitions, but it rages and makes noise like waterfall, requiring more and more new approaches. And we think that humanity cannot develop without conflict, because conflict and its resolution are a step forward. This is life. No conflict, no life. Another thing is how to respond. We found in world practice, in mythology, phenomena that are somehow related to the theme of our conference. The well-known myth of the apple of discord, and this is nothing more than an attempt to create a conflict, and the created conflict always provokes its resolution. All the conflicts are different. There are many categories of conflicts: large-scale, local, housing, family, of various nature. All of them are classically similar with each other. I mean structure. Each conflict has sides. Each conflict has an apple of discord, an object. Each conflict has its own way of resolution. One way to resolve the conflict is Danil Nazipovich, help out, tell me. Colleagues,
Добрый день.
Good afternoon.
Способов решения конфликтов на самом деле
In
очень
fact, there are a
много.
lot of ways to resolve the conflict, and a lot of criminologists and lawyers, and criminologists as lawyers in particular, they have gathered here. Correspondingly, criminology is a way to study conflict, and the law is a way to prevent conflict, or law is a way to resolve the conflict. Conflicts can be different, and legal nature, and family, and conflicts of life. I don't know. Here is Alexander Ivanovich Chuchayev, here in the hall. This is a conflict that a person on the 70th anniversary is in the conference hall instead of being in the family circle. Alexander Ivanovich, we congratulate you from the bottom of our heart. It was very pleasant that despite the seminal triumph you are right, but this is also a certain degree of conflict, but we will smooth it out and try to make it interesting for you to be in Yekaterinburg on your anniversary. Here is the apple that Ivan Yakovlevich spoke of. In fact, not so ambiguously as my teacher said. The point is that you must agree. Ivan Yakovlevich, that when a person receives an apple and the one who gives it to him, in order to develop conflict, they get some satisfaction. In any conflict, as in any crime, there is a certain benefit and can be pleasant, because the offender often commits a crime in order to gain satisfaction. Well, maybe you're right. I want to say that conflict as a means of overcoming the obstacle that provides an impetus for a new conflict, and progress is progressing. So, not exactly. In one case, the conflict is resolved by the method of evolution, and in other by the method of revolution. It all depends on the way, customs, traditions, which it's customary to resolve the conflict. Here is one of them.
Это конфликт или это способ решения конфликта?
Is it a conflict or a way to resolve the conflict?
Ну, на самом деле здесь мы можем
Conflict
сказать,
and
что
way.
и специалисты
Here
по
we can say
уголовному праву,
that
если
criminal
что,
law
мне
experts
могут
can
возразить,
object
в
to
том
me.
смысле, что вот это как раз и самый первый
This
и
is the
наиболее
very
привычный для
first and
человека
most
способ
familiar
решения
way for a
конфликта.
person to
И на
resolve the
самом деле
conflict.
иногда это гораздо
Sometimes it
быстрее
works faster
действует,
than
чем
legal
механизмы
mechanisms.
правовые. Как говорится, дал по голове,
As I
вот
say,
уже все,
hit on the
конфликт
head, and the
решен. Но,
conflict is
конечно же, это
settled.
такой примитивный
This is
способ,
a
но если
primitive
мы
way,
посмотрим
but
в
if we
историю
look at the
уголовного
history
права,
of criminal
то до
law,
того, как то, что мы
then
изучаем,
before
стало
what we
правом,
studied
это как
became
раз и
law,
была месть.
it was
То есть
revenge.
произошел конфликт, я тебе
That
отомстил,
is, I took revenge on
сделал тебе
you,
тоже плохо, и на этом конфликт был исчерпан.
and the conflict is settled.
Вы знаете, даже в такое дикое время, когда
You know, even in such a wild time when a blow to the head reached faster than a handwritten essay to a particular artist, still civilization moved forward and worked out humanitarian methods of resolving the conflict. Here is a famous pipe of the world that solved problems of a global scale. What can you say about that? This is a ritualized form of conflict resolution, that is the primary ritual. When human society realized that it wasn't quite right to beat, ritualized forms of calming the conflict appeared. The pipe of the world is the best known example of this. There are such forms even now. They are preserved in primitive society. For example, the Indians of the Amazon region still solve conflicts with the help of certain rituals. They administer a primitive court. So now, Caucasus, perhaps undoubtedly, there are ways to reconcile the bloodlines, and today, at the session, the ancient customs of law, this very issue will be discussed. How today these goals of reconciliation at the pre-legal level affect our system, and how they take root with it. The law somehow reacts to these methods of resolving the conflict. In Soviet law, there was a crime representing vestiges of legal customs. You know, conflict is a conflict.
Что не все процессы замирали одновременно.
But you need to keep in mind that not all processes froze at the same time. There was no right, but people lived and resolved conflicts that perhaps were even more than necessary.
Вы знаете, мы обратили внимание, что
They were somehow solved. We noticed that gradually, but
сферу разрешения
in a very good way, the
взяла под
sphere
свое
of conflict resolution
религия.
took religion under its wing.
Появилось такое явление, как покаяние.
Appeared such thing as repentance.
Благо,
It would seem good.
вы знаете, с появлением
With the
вот этого
advent
блага
of the good,
появилась проблема.
a problem arose.
Теперь преступник обращается к Богу,
Now the criminal turns to
надеясь,
God,
что Бог ему простит
hoping
его
that
грехи.
he asks
А где потерпевший?
him
Почему
his sins.
его не стало видно?
Where is the
Потому что
victim?
его
Why didn't he
потихоньку
become visible?
Он
But because he was
оказался
forced out.
отрезанным от реальной действительности, и в этом плане действительно постепенно с поля зрения и с поля работы стало удаляться самое примирение в том виде, в каком оно было в церковных канонах.
So self-reconciliation gradually began to move away from the field of work in the form in which it was in church canons. Well, it's not for nothing that if we look at the history of the punishment in the form of imprisonment, we will understand that it came to us from church law, since initially monasteries for repentance appeared as one of the religious institutions. And this is repentance indeed. The figure of the victim was removed. The offender became alone with God, sometimes with the mediation of a priest, but the victim gradually left. The victim's private revenge on the criminal was replaced by the institution of repentance. Religious repentance was not always in line with legal order. If we look at Russian truth, then there is no repentance, and the repentance law of ancient Russia, which came from Byzantium and had a strong influence on our legal system, of course, and actually warned the further development of criminal law, especially in Rus. Religious repentance was quickly replaced by a secular court as an institution of medieval society. This secular court took the place occupied by the church. In a sense, the secular court has become a ritual. The ritualization of the court is still preserved. We have Professor Miguel from Spain in the hall. He knows what a judicial ritual is. These are red robes, which are still present in legal system of some states. Here is a medieval picture that donkey is judged in. It was a ritual that was specially designed to bring justice to animals, and here the animals became part of the trial, part of this ritual. And the donkey was severely punished. His leash was sold at auction in order to compensate for the damage to the owner of the crop that he was destroying. But this anecdotal example of ritual illustrates how gradually people moved from the pipe of the world to such a beautiful ritual of justice. Echoes of this ritual we can still see. Unfortunately, not the victims were the onlookers present.
Присутствующие зеваки, которые ждут вот такой смачной информации.
And probably to say that this is in the past, but now think about how we love to watch TV shows, and
заполнены, оказывается, картинами подобного рода.
And those TV shows are full of rituals, and they also performed. In fact, the parties to the victim were occupied by onlookers who wanted bread and circuses. But this institute of theatrical justice
в дальнейшем преодолел определенные
overcame
трансформации.
certain
И сейчас
transformations,
вот эта, ну, в
and
кавычках,
now
театрализованность
this
как раз дает
theatricality
определенную
gives a certain
гарантию
guarantee
соблюдения
of
ряда
observance of a
существенных
number
прав.
of
Может быть, это
essential
осталась доля традиции. Но ведь
rights.
если мы обратим внимание, при
A
крахе
faction of
любого
the
общества,
tradition
при
remains.
крахе
But
государства,
the collapse
многие
of
институты,
society,
в том
in the
числе
event of
формальное
the
правосудие,
collapse
теряют
of
свой
any
авторитет и
institution,
вес.
justice loses
И
its
тогда,
authority and weight,
извините, куда
and then,
обращаться?
excuse me,
Ну,
where
великим
to go.
людям есть, когда у них больше
Great
возможностей
people have more
открыть дверь,
opportunities.
постучаться, послушать, принять совет. А простой народ.
And as for the common people, and you know, in the 90s, such a phenomenon appeared that was characteristic of the Russian Federation, when people on various issues turned not to the court,
к авторитетам криминального мира.
but they went to the authorities of the criminal world.
Было скорое решение, но вы знаете, это явление опасно тем, что
This
оно
was a dangerous
и так,
phenomenon.
Сводило на нет авторитет
It already negated the authority of the criminal law. The law was violated here, and the criminal dictatorship prevailed.
свое владение распространял.
Да, криминальные суды 90-х,
Yes, the criminal courts of the 90s, when
обращение к авторитету,
appeal to
это было ведь
authority
способом не только
was
решения
not
споров
only a
между
way to resolve the conflict between the
конфликтующими
parties
сторонами,
to
организованной
organized
преступностью,
crime,
но и простые люди могли
but
обратиться. Мы знаем
ordinary people
всякие
could
истории
appeal.
про
We
крыши
know all
и
sorts of
прочее,
stories
когда действительно этот суд
when
в
this
какой-то
institution helped to
степени
solve some issues that
помогал
could
решить
not
те
could be
вопросы,
solved
которые не могли решиться в силу
otherwise
краха
due to the
некоторых
collapse of
государственных
certain
институтов.
state
Но
institutions.
абсолютно в связи с этим, после того, как власть
And
криминальных авторитетов
when the power of
превысила
criminal authorities
черту
crossed the entire
дозволенного,
border,
и в этой связи государство начинает вновь
state
укреплять
power
свой
began to
авторитет
strengthen
и бороться в
its
первую очередь с
authority
этими
and fight
криминальными
against
судами.
this criminal
Но при
cause.
этом мы должны отметить, что в
But
это же
also we
время,
should
кроме
note
криминальных
that at the
авторитетов,
time,
на Кавказе
in
вновь
addition to
возникли
criminal
суды,
authorities, tribal courts, gypsy tribal
родовые,
courts,
цыганские родовые
reconciliation
суды,
of
институты примирения
blood
кровников,
workers
они вновь
arose
все ожили.
again.
То есть, когда разрушилось государство, вот эти наши
They all
примитивные
came to
способы
life.
решения
When the
правовых
state
по своему
collapsed, primitive
содержанию
ways to
конфликтов
resolve
вновь
conflicts
появились.
reappeared.
И вот что делать?
So what should we do?
Конечно, каждый раз обращаться к криминальному авторитету, это
Each time
себе
it's
дороже,
impossible to
поэтому
turn to a criminal
другая появилась
authority.
крайность.
Therefore, they
Казалось бы,
passed a
нет
law.
закона, принимаете решения на основании этих законов, но плодотворная работа над
Fruitful work
законодательством, в
on
том числе
legislation,
уголовным,
including
в
criminal
первую
law,
очередь, породила картину
gave rise
вот
to
такого
a picture
многоцветия
of the
уголовно-правового
multicolor nature
характера.
of criminal law.
Почему-то вдруг уголовному закону
The criminal
так
law
или
was
иначе была
given the
придана
role of
роль разрешителя всех процедур,
resolver of all the
которые встречаются в
procedures
жизни человека.
that occur in a
Но
person's
мы знаем
life.
в жизни совсем по-другому, что
But this didn't
многоплодие,
work
к сожалению, не срабатывало, потому что выстрел был
because the shot was
намеченной цели.
past the
Стремление
intended
вернуть способ
target.
разрешения конфликтов, в
The
том числе
desire to
уголовно-правовых,
return the means of
цивилизованное русло,
conflict
фактически
resolution to
привели
the
к тому,
administrative
что
legal
мы видим
channel
сейчас. Это так
led to what we
называемая
see
фраза,
now, the well-known phrase,
известная, точнее, фраза «Уголовный кодекс как
the criminal
средство
code
решения
as a
всех
means
возможных
of
проблем».
solving
То
all
есть, когда
the
мы слышим о
possible
какой-то проблеме,
problems.
очень часто возникает
That's
сразу
when we
инициатива.
hear
А
about
давайте-ка
any
мы
problems,
внесем
there is an
поправочку в Уголовный
initiative to
кодекс,
amend the
и
criminal
жизнь сразу
code.
наладится.
This
И
excessive
эта излишняя
criminalization
криминализация фактически привела к
has
тому,
led
что у нас
to
наряду с традиционными
the
преступлениями
emergence of
появились и
pseudo-crimes
псевдопреступления, и как бы преступления, и
along with
недопреступления.
traditional
И
crimes.
в связи с этим Уголовный кодекс
In
превращается
connection with this,
в определенного
the
спрута,
criminal code
который
turns to a
потихоньку
certain
проникает во многие
octopus
сферы
that
жизни, где, в
penetrates
общем-то,
into
он не
many
должен
areas of life where it
По
shouldn't
сути
be
дела, все
present.
вопросы жилищного,
All questions of
семейного,
housing, family,
бытового характера,
domestic nature,
там, где очень ранимая грань между частной жизнью,
private
куда
life,
никто не может
where no one can
проникать, кроме
penetrate.
владельца, стало открыто,
It
доступно.
became
И
open
вот
and accessible.
картина завершается тем, что подобное отношение к
So,
уголовному
a similar attitude
законодательству
to criminal law
действительно породило
gave rise
такое явление,
to a
как,
phenomenon
Спрутизация, да.
да, когда все вопросы решаются его
when
помощью.
all issues are
Ну, на
resolved
самом
with
деле,
its
Уголовный
help.
кодекс и не
In
может
fact, the
быть
criminal
эффективным
code
способом решения
cannot be
каких-то
effective
проблем,
way
кроме
to solve any
традиционных
problems
сфер,
other than
где он
traditional
должен
ones.
быть. Поэтому, когда, например,
So, for example, the public reaction to the amendments to the norms related to domestic violence is clear. This was several years ago. It's clear that this caused a reaction in society itself because the criminal code invaded those matters which shouldn't have been active. But this, besides the frustration, led to the fact that the legal lawyer becomes a carrier of formal knowledge. Now we divide criminal law into large sub-branches, like economic criminal law, financial criminal law, and others. That is, criminal law has grown, and not the happy lawyer who is depicted here. He is immersed in this matter. Maybe he shouldn't do it. Tomorrow the criminal code will change, and what will happen to this branch of knowledge? So formalization won, and this is not always right. But, Ivan Yakovlevich, formalization can help in some ways, because it established a pre-known framework. But when it's a goal, it's a mistake. So I mean the same. So, step by step, criminal legislation cannot be considered only negatively. There are positive aspects. The appearance of the Article 76 of the Criminal Code, reconciliation with the victim. The criminal law undergoes the same changes that the whole society is experiencing. To resolve the conflicts. But where does the legislator look? Taking into account the experience of the past, it suggests the direction in which to move. So here is a scene that mediation is a very qualified way to resolve the conflict to the extent permitted under the criminal law. How do you see this situation? In fact, the situation returns the ancient methods of reconciliation only in a more civilized way by passing the criminal legal regulator as such that its reconciliation penetrates into those areas where it didn't exist before. Partially, reconciliation is a treatment of drug addicts or delay of punishment, and in economic quotation marks, when reconciliation of an economic entity has committed economic crimes, with the state as a whole is also an institution of reconciliation. In many courts, figures of mediators appeared, whose task is to reconcile the parties in the framework of applying the procedure corresponding to Article 76. But there is another way, another extreme. The abuse of good qualities in criminal law is also negative. If there is no sense of proportion in law enforcement, then we will return to the same apple of discord with which we began our story. There will already be an apple of charm if we are tempted by the procedures of the excessive introduction of mediation in the field of criminal law. This can lead to the opposite effect, when the authority of the criminal law, which is obvious in those areas where it's important, will fall, and it will be replaced by the reconciliation of the bloodlines and ancient tribunals. The level of civilization today allows us to understand that mediation should also occupy a crucial place in criminal law. But at the same time, traditional methods of resolving such a major conflict, a crime within the framework of a criminal legal channel, should be preserved. Don't judge us. It's the first first our lesson, the first form. So we did it as we could.
Спасибо, коллеги.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Наша цель была на
colleagues.
самом деле
Our
рассказать о
aim
тех
was to
темах, которые
tell
будут
us
сегодня
about the
звучать
themes
на
which
разных
will be discussed today in
секциях,
different sections,
яблочную
to
тематику, и
make
вот от яблока к яблоку
the
будем
common
ходить
theme
между
of the
секциями.
apple
Спасибо
theme.
большое.
So we will spread it through the sections. Thank you very much.